So we're going to talk about shading a little bit today. This is a number 3 pencil. Notice it says number 3 hard. Normally we use a number 2 pencil like this, which is number 2 HB. In pencils, hard means H means hard and B means soft for some reason. So an HB pencil is softer than this pencil, which is just an H. In pencils, hard means it makes a lighter line. Soft means it makes a darker line. And if you have a hard time remembering that, just think about diamond, which is made out of carbon. Obviously, if you drag it across a piece of paper, none of the diamond comes off onto the paper. It doesn't make a mark. And a piece of charcoal, which is also carbon, is much softer. It'll make a dark mark on the paper. So the harder the pencil, the lighter mark that it will make. When we start shaded projects, we usually want to use a harder pencil because we don't want it to make a very dark mark when we're finding our lines. So I'm going to ask you to draw along with me. This is a pretty simple form. I'm going to think about the angle formed inside this corner and the angle formed over here. I'm going to make verticals. Notice I'm doing this very lightly. You can do it even lighter. I'm trying to do it dark enough for you to see what I'm up to here. This would be an ellipse. Notice it's got a flatter curve on this side and a tighter curve on this side because it's slightly foreshortened. And this comes up straight behind, and here's some converging orthogonals. We've got this one and this one. Make it a little more deep from front to back. So that's our first step, drawing the outlines. Thinking about perspective a little. Next step is to shadow map, which is drawing the shadow shape on the ground, which comes up about 1/3 of the way along the back edge of the shape, and the horizon line, and the shadow map on the side, which comes up about to here. And that's it for the basic shape. I think I could zoom in a little bit on this. It's better. Now I'm going to start shading. So for the first shading, I'm going to use my most natural hand direction, and I'm going to keep using my hard pencil, the number 3 pencil, and notice that I'm not stopping my shading between this shape and this shape. I'm thinking this all as one big shadow shape. I'm just laying in a light tone. You can pause this recording at any time to catch up with me if I'm going too fast. And notice I don't want this to look like stripes. I want it to look like a nice even tone, and I'm not paying too much attention to my edges yet. I'm just laying it in. And I'm not going to touch anything else because everything else is in the light, and all I'm dealing with now are the things that are in shadow. Now for second shading, I'm going to start to follow my edges. So this edge here needs to be pretty sharp, so I'm going to shade vertically in order to tighten that edge. This will come really naturally after a while, but you need to think about it when you're starting out. See what I'm doing? I'm just shading right along the surface, which is naturally going to sharpen this edge. When I get to the top here, I'm going to shade right, curve with the shape, and then I'm going to just trail off when I get to this edge, because this is a soft edge. So remember, to sharpen an edge, you shade with it, and to soften the edge, you shade into it. Notice that as I get down near the bottom of this shape, it gets a little lighter because it's picking up some reflected light from the ground. So when I get down here, I'm going to trail off a little. Now on the ground, notice that this area right in here is darker than the shape. This area right here is lighter than the shape. So when I'm shading here, I'm going to sharpen the edge by darkening along this side. And here, I'm going to sharpen the edge by darkening along this side. Anytime you can see an edge, it means that the values on the two sides are different. Otherwise, the edge would be invisible. Then I want to transition from the sharpening strokes to softening strokes. I'm trying to soften this edge at the outside margin of the shadow. So I'm going to shade across like this. That's also going to reinforce the flatness of the tabletop. A lot of art teachers say there are no such things as lines in nature, but notice that where these two objects meet does form essentially a line. What you're seeing there is a very skinny cast shadow. So if you see a line, draw a line. Just remember that you're actually not drawing a boundary, you're drawing a cast shadow. We don't want to put hard lines like this along our boundaries. And because there's a microplane along this corner where the corner turns from shadow to light right through here, we would expect to see a slight darkening there, but there's also a slight softness to that turn. So see what I'm doing? I'm just going to slightly soften that edge and bring that corner forward by just darkening along it like that. I'm exaggerating that effect a little bit from what I'm seeing in the photograph, but I think it helps to bring that corner forward a little bit to explain for the viewer that this is not, it's a sharp edge, but it's not razor sharp. The final step of the drawing is going to be to think about halftones. Halftones are the areas that are not in shadow. And we're going to draw those using the number 3 pencil again. And it's important to barely touch the paper now because we don't want any of our halftones to compete with our lights. And I like to do this last because the most important work in shading is the shadows. So I'm going to do a first shading direction back here, but very lightly. And a little bit of sharpening along this edge, but again, we don't want our halftones to compete with our shadow shapes. And so I'm going to just do a little bit of shading. Notice that this front of this shape darkens a little bit down here. I'm not aiming for a photographic effect, just aiming to capture the general pattern of lights and darks. I'm not trying to match all my values like I might if I was doing a charcoal drawing. So that's a completed graphite study of this photograph. It's a little easier to do a careful shaded study in charcoal, but since our main issue with this project is perspective, this graphite technique is going to work out fine for us. Before I leave, I'm just going to show you an example of a really great finished perspective drawing from a former student. Notice that in this drawing you can see similar shading direction effects to the ones I was just demonstrating. You can see a little bit of outlining of forms, but notice we don't see a lot of smudging. All the shading direction here is very clean and clear. If I zoom in on it, you can always tell which way she's moving her hand, and notice that on a soft edge like this she's shading into the edge, and to sharpen edges she's shading with the edges. I'll leave this image as a reference for you to look at for thinking about your shading technique, but the basic elements of what you're seeing here are all in the demonstration that I just gave you. She's also using even softer pencils for her darks, and when you get to that stage, I'll give you some 2B or 4B pencils to use, and that's going to help you achieve blacker blacks. I could go a little darker with the HB pencil, but notice it's going to get a little shiny if I do that. It's usually better if you want to get much darker effects to just use a softer pencil like 2B, 4B, or even a 6B pencil. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks a lot.